This brings us to the conclusion of our final session and the end of the Rhodes Healthcare Forum for this year. And on behalf of the committee, I would just like to share a few closing comments. Thank you all, first of all, for attending with such a generosity of spirit, of time, of knowledge, and of mentorship that particularly for the current scholars is absolutely invaluable. I think this weekend has completely exceeded our expectations when we started brainstorming much earlier in the year. And for me, this was encapsulated in my breakout session yesterday when I sat at the same table that we had all our committee meetings at, engaging in an incredible discussion with so many experts that we had been speaking excitedly about for many, many months. There are so many highlights that I don't think I could list them all, but I hope that you've enjoyed journeying with us through the story, where we've culminated in the intersection of clinical medicine, technological advances, research and development, translating science into policy, into action on the ground level, and how to create innovative solutions to address these issues in underserved areas and in under-recognized populations. And so all of this was then under that umbrella of global versus local, and with last night's dinner speech, the personal, where the idea of gaining power in our relationships encapsulated exactly our concept of forward together. And I think the most important comment at the end now to say is that I hope we continue to move forward together and that it doesn't end here. And so I'd like to hand over to my colleague Alex, who will be enlightening us on how we're going to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Romina. So just to kind of say again that one of the things that we really hoped for and what we feel is one of the power of a conference like this is that we're able to bring together people from very diverse background, but all with a common interest in healthcare. And I think that that was aptly illustrated over the course of this weekend, where we had interactions between people from the biopharma industry with public health professionals and experts and clinicians on the ground and mental health experts, as well as kind of current scholars. And for me, one of the greatest sort of benefits of this weekend was the ability to interact not only with more senior people who were experts in their field, but also with people who were sort of mid-career and closer to us who were current scholars, and having that sort of diversity of opinion and that diversity of mentorship and interaction. And what we'd really like to see is that that sort of connection and that networking continues into the future, and that some of the thoughts and discussions and ideas that were inspired here are able to be carried forward into action in the future. And so to that end, what we'd like to make sure is that the conversations continue, and we'd really encourage you to continue both with the personal connections you've made with people over the course of the weekend, as well as through, for instance, the resources of social media. We've been engaging on social media throughout the weekend, and if you guys are able to, please do continue to interact via social media. To this end, similar to social media, there's also the Rhodes Scholars Network, which we believe facilitates some of these discussions. We're also going to be sending out an email which will have a document which summarizes what happened this weekend, and it will also contain more links on how you can continue the conversation going forward. So we'd encourage you to do that. As you guys know, a lot of these sessions have been recorded, and we'll be making those available for people to kind of review what was said and go over what was discussed. So those are some of the resources we're looking at. But in addition to that, we're also going to be continuing to host talks on this topic and similar topics to this in Rhodes House, in the hope that Rhodes House continues to be this center for discussion and sharing of ideas around public health and around healthcare and health inequity, as we've been discussing this weekend. I'd also like to say thanks to quite a few people. There are so many people to thank that made this weekend possible. I really hope that I don't miss anyone out, but a few names just to mention are in particular to say thank you to our two co-conveners, Sir John Bell and Dr. Tariro Makazange. Also, all of our speakers, all of the mentors who made themselves available throughout the weekend. We'd like to thank every delegate that came through for the weekend and gave up their time to be part of this. We'd in particular also like to thank our sponsor, Roivant, for making this weekend possible and for financing it. And we'd like to thank Bob and the Front of Rhodes House team who've done an incredible job over the course of the weekend. We'd obviously like to thank Oxford Fine Dining for their catering and for the childcare. The childcare provision that was provided throughout the weekend. And we'd like to thank the Rhodes House staff who've helped us with planning this entire weekend. In particular, Emily and Rodolfo, Isabel, Debbie, Claire, and Babette, who've been incredible throughout this entire process. We'd like to thank the Atlantic Fellows who made the effort to be here, and we'd like to thank the program leaders of the Atlantic Fellowship who were present and have been incredible throughout this program. And lastly, we'd like to thank Charles, the Warden, who's really been incredibly supportive over the last few years in getting the Rhodes Healthcare Forum to what it is now. And on that note, I'd like to introduce Charles, who's going to be giving the kind of closing remarks. And thanks very much.
Well, I won't say very much more, except it's been really wonderful to be with all of you, and so mostly a deep thanks. The equitable provision of healthcare is really at the very heart of what makes good societies good. And of all the things that we could fight for, this has to be right up at the very top. And it's been remarkable to see the passion and commitment of all of you with all different backgrounds and from different countries, really genuinely moving. For us in Rhodes House, this is also really the fulfillment of a dream, and that dream is sort of twofold. One is the idea of a fellowship of fellowships, people coming together from the Atlantic Fellowship. We have Mandela Rhodes Scholars, we have Cambridge Gates Scholars, we have Rhodes Scholars, and fellows from many other institutions. And for us, that idea of a big fellowship where we genuinely feel shoulder to shoulder at working on these most pressing problems is one that gives us real hope. The other one is lifelong fellowship, and one of the things that's most wonderful for me being here is to see the different generations and how well all of you work together. You know, the incredible passion and energy of youth, and also the wonderful experience and wisdom of those of you who've been longer in the field. And that mix gives me this incredibly optimistic sense for the ability to tackle these incredibly difficult problems. So again, I think optimism is what I leave feeling. I won't repeat the thank yous, but I would like to thank the organizing scholars. It's an enormous amount of work to put on something like this, and I think you did an amazing job. So thank you, all of you organizing scholars. Alex said it already, but I think the critical thing for us is, the critical challenge is, how do we keep momentum? We always feel great momentum and optimism coming out of physical convenings. And so I encourage all of you to use the great one-on-one connections that you've developed, but also the various mechanisms that Alex described for continuing to work together shoulder to shoulder, even as these 11 months and 29 days elapse until the next time we're all physically together on this particular purpose. So I'll leave you with that challenge. Thank you, all of you.